Welcome, everyone, to episode 81 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan, coming to you from the continent of California. We are live and direct recording this on a Monday morning. This used to be a one-person podcast in the beginning. I brought a couple of my friends in with me. Sometimes life gets in the way. Still love those guys to death. Shout out to Ricky Congo and Marcus. Get well soon, Marcus. And now it's back to being a one-person podcast where I talk to people that I interact with on social media and even in the real world, and real good people. We're going to get to that here in a moment, but you can check out all 81 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast, available on iTunes, by searching Gully Blanchard. You can also check us out on Spotify. We are on Google Play Music. We are on Stitcher Radio by searching Gully Blanchard. Subscribe to the podcast. We try to bring you guys some new episodes once or twice a week. Been on a good run these past couple weeks. We're doing a lot of episodes with a lot of good people, so I've been real fortunate with that. You can also check out the pod at No Coast Bias. Shout out to Derek Hernandez. I also get a chance to put my wrestling writings on that website as well. Again, nocoastbias.com. I do cover the Sacramento Kings periodically. There's not a lot of good to cover, unfortunately, with them right now. But I'll write about them periodically at royalpain.com. Shout out to Rafa and Jonathan who do good work over there. That's going to be through Fansided. But this week I'm talking to one of my good friends who I've had a really good relationship with these past couple of years. A really good, solid guy. He's from Vegas. He does a lot of stuff with the NBA and covers it through Vegas. So, Jameson, man, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man, thanks for having me as always, man. Definitely appreciate it. It's good to be back.
Absolutely, man. So where can people, if they want to check out the work you do or just follow you on social media, where can they find you?
Well, during the NBA season, which is now almost year-round because, the NBA doesn't stop. There's always, news or media or whatever. There's always stuff going on. So I'm on ESPN 1100 out here in Vegas, Fox 1340 in Vegas and New Mexico, 7:20 a.m. out here in Vegas, and it's also in 4 different states as well. ESPN, I want to say it's 1560 in Nebraska. I might be off, but I think it's 15. It's either 1480 or 15. So I can't remember, but ESPN in Lincoln, Nebraska, NBA there, and of course Drive Time Sports in Utah. Oh, my God, Jordan Buscarini, who takes care of me. So a lot of places on radio, pretty much on average once a day or once a week. Once a day for the week, I'm on radio talking NBA, so it's pretty cool.
That's great, man. I know you do a lot of good stuff, so it's good to see good people get good opportunities. I want to get into what happened over the weekend with this UFC fight with Conor and Khabib. I think everyone pretty much calls him Khabib because no one wants to go near his last name,
right?
Myself included. So his name is Khabib, and that's what we're going to call him. Did you get a chance to see what happened with that fight?
I did. It was ugly from the start. It was ugly. It was really ugly. It's to the point now where Conor he's going toward Ronda Rousey territory, where he's really not known as a UFC fighter anymore. He's known for other things. And that's not good when you're a combat fighter, and that's your job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. When you're most known for doing other stuff instead of your actual job, it's never a good thing.
From a technical standpoint, how did Conor look in the fight to you? I'm not sure, because I'm the first to admit I'm not the biggest UFC fan. I don't follow it. I don't know the ins and outs. I don't pretend to. I know Khabib was supposed to be the next guy. But one thing I took away from that fight was Conor didn't look as either focused or didn't look as successful as he normally is. And I'm not sure if that's Conor's lack of preparation or Khabib being that good or a combination of both.
Well, as we all know, when it comes to fighting, when it comes to combat sports, whether it's boxing, jiu-jitsu, UFC, whatever you do, there's a level of hunger you got to have to be successful. You can't, under any circumstances, go into a fight or go into that type of event not being hungry, not being aggressive. You just can't. To me, Conor's in a dangerous spot because he's already made enough money that more than any of those fighters will ever make in their lives in that sport. And he's famous, so he doesn't really have a real – and that's always I'm always very cautious when I see those kind of guys because, when you're fighting, you have to be motivated. There has to be something that keeps you motivated for fighting. And if you're not able to do so, if you're not able to find that motivation, it can get real tricky. So for me, when I look at Conor, I look at a guy that I don't know how many more UFC fights he has. I really don't, because really I don't know what he wants to be. Is he going to be an actor? Is he going to be a WWE guy? Is he just going to be a celebrity that gets on everybody's nerves? I don't know. So when I saw the fight, I was like, yeah, this guy doesn't look like he wants to fight. Like that's exactly. It looked like he did not want to fight. Like it looked like he was a guy that had an obligation to fulfill, and that was about it. Now people wasn't going to check him out because of his character. But with that being said, man, he didn't look like he wanted to be there. Like he looked like he wanted to check out.
And one thing that I took away from that, and I agree with what you're saying about he may have surpassed that hunger, but if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't he still have a 6-fight deal with UFC going on right now? Like that's a lot of fights to be contractually obligated for. Bless you. If it's something that he's doesn't have the hunger to do. I watch him and I see that there's a bigger issues with UFC in a whole to where they don't have a lot of mainstream stars that are going to bring the casual fan in. I think Conor's really their last full-time guy. I think the other two are probably Brock and Bones, but those guys are so in and out, and they quote unquote stay in the sport with their drug issues. But I'm just interested. He seems to me like he's the biggest fighter that UFC has from a mainstream standpoint. And if he's not interested in this fight, which is supposed to be one of the biggest fights of his career, he's on the hook for, I believe, another 5 fights. Is that right?
Something like that. But also remember, you can always buy yourself out of a contract, especially if you have brighter things on the horizon. That can always take place. However, it doesn't look like he wants to fight. Like it doesn't look like a guy that really was motivated, to be honest with you, because he did not look like he was ready for that fight at all. Like he looked like a guy that if he won, cool. If not, no big deal. No big deal. Like that's what it looked like to me. With that being said, it's tough when you've accomplished the kind of fame and fortune he has, especially in such a short time. When I think it was like 3 years ago, somebody, I forgot what it was. I think it was like a photographer, or it was somebody that was like, "Hey, I could do this, this, and this for you for $200," and he didn't have $200 for it. Mm-hmm. And now he's a guy that made close to 9 figures on the Floyd fight and is making pretty good money in UFC. It's pretty tough to say, like, hey, I'm going to keep getting punched in the face. It's tough. Like, it's really tough, especially when you don't have to. A lot of them, people don't understand. The problem with UFC is this. The company makes a lot of money. The fighters usually don't, especially the mid to lower tiers. The difference between UFC and boxing is this. The lower to middle tier guys still get paid pretty good. The upper tier guys, of course, they get paid pretty well. UFC, the biggest problem with that is Dana White and all those guys get most of the money and it trickle down. So what they do is they keep the fighters broke, so they keep them fighting constant. That's the biggest trick with UFC.
And now, is that because there isn't really another alternate option? And I liken that to WWE because that's sort of my area of specialty. And I think with them as well, there's really not anywhere else to go where you're going to obtain. And if you're in WWE, you can wrestle on the independent circuits. I'm sure you've seen those cards at the Orleans and things like that. But those opportunities are not readily available for everyone to make the same amount of money that you're making in WWE, not with the company. Is that the same in UFC to where there really isn't a lot of other options if you're not part of that UFC brand? I know there's Bellator, but that seems like it's sort of the big three of UFC.
That's part of it. Also, they have leveraged themselves pretty well. The people who run UFC, they've leveraged it well to where they are the people who control it. They are the people. They're not getting held hostage by their fighters. In boxing, it's a bit of a different story because boxers, especially nowadays, have been pretty smart enough to say, hey, I'm the drawing part here. I need to make this amount of money. I'm the reason why, and that's why we see a lot of guys like especially Floyd Mayweather pretty much call their own shots when it comes to contracts. UFC is not like that. UFC, they pretty much put everything together. They're the ones that are making everything happen. So it's a very interesting situation for what I'm seeing is that the UFC, they control a lot more of the whole situation, whether it's the salaries, the marketing, they control everything. And they learned from boxing because most of the boxing promoters, it's still a reason why Bob Arum and Don King are still alive and still running, even though Don King's not as active as he once was, of course. But it's the reason why those two guys, pretty much controlled the sport for 40 years. It's the reason why. And when you're in the combat sport, it's a really tricky business. And if you can get a controlling interest early, you're going to do very well.
That's interesting because it is interesting to me because I do think that UFC, one of the issues they have is they don't have a lot of those mainstream guys like they used to. They don't have the days of the Tito Ortizes and the Chuck Liddells and the Rampage Jacksons and, the Randy Couture's, the guys who are the mainstream draws, the guys who are really responsible for pushing the card that people are paying to see. I think those days are gone. I think now people are just watching UFC fights just to watch a UFC card as opposed to watching certain fighters. And I think that UFC, from what you're saying, I think UFC sort of figured that out and they're taking advantage of that specific draw, them being the draw, not the fighters.
Right, and that's the thing. Now they're going to have to create another star soon because here's the biggest issue: they've lost in like last year or so. Ronda obviously was a huge star, humongous star. John Jones, we know the issues he's had gone through. Whether you believe some of the stuff that's being said out there or not, he has been an active fighter that, and we all agree upon that. And then now with Conor, Conor's a guy that he's a moneymaker for them. If he's on the way out, or if he's a guy that's getting his head kicked in every 6 months, they got some issues because you got to create a star. And the one thing boxing did back in the day, when you were a star, you were fighting every 3 months because you were starving. Like, people don't remember Mike Tyson was fighting like once every 34 days or once every 40 days because he wasn't getting paid that much. Nowadays, you got military boxers making $800,000 every 9 months, and they're cool because they're not starving. So it's a difference. Like, it's a huge difference now ever before. You got to create brands. You got to create personas. And right now, we don't know who the next person is. We'll see. I mean, you just never know who that guy is. It can happen overnight, to be honest with you. It really can. But until it does, UFC is kind of in trouble, but they are embracing the overall brand more than the individual at the moment.
I lost connection with Jameson here. So
Yeah,
what I'm
good.
going to try to do. Oh, okay. Got you back. Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the last thing I heard was you were talking about how guys in boxing were fighting every 30, 40 days. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so back in the day, guys were fighting once a month, once every 2 or 3 months because they were broke. Nowadays, so you got to know who they were, you got to learn them, you got to, they were a recognizable face. I mean, I remember a guy like Mike Tyson, even though I wasn't really alive back then, but when he was coming up, he was fighting often. Like, he was fighting once every month or two, just because that's what boxers did back then. Nowadays, you're lucky to get a guy fighting twice a year. And that's the difference. Like, back then, we got to know guys, we got to learn guys. That's not the case anymore. Once guys get paid, they're going to fight as few times as possible, and it makes sense. But at the same time, it takes away from getting to learn guys and know guys.
Absolutely. So I want to transition onto a couple other sports I know you're a big fan of. I want to hit all three of the main ones that I know. We're going to start with USC football. Hell is going on over there. I'm not used to USC not being a prominent or a team that is at least in the top 25. What's going on in Southern California with them?
Well, here's the issue. You have a coaching staff and also an administration that isn't up to par. These are things that happen. People don't get it. When you have college sports, usually you have good coaching and good administration. Everybody's on the same page. Well, for those that don't know, USC, their president, they had to remove the president. There's a scandal there with with some sexual assault with some other faculty members. Like, there's a lot going on. So the president is pretty much has been removed. The athletic director he's a title only guy, meaning he's there title only, really hasn't made any big decisions just yet. He hasn't made any comments. You don't know what his true thoughts are because he hasn't said anything. And then you have the coach. The coach, Helton is a very nice guy, very, very humble guy. However, it's college sports. I don't care about nice or humble. Can you coach? Can you develop players? The best coaches in college, they develop players and they have a system that works and they stick with it. Clay Helton has not, under any circumstances, progressed as a coach of this team. He's lucky he had a top 3 quarterback last couple of years that pretty much saved his job. But now we're starting to see that, hey, he's really not a good coach, and these are the things that are happening. So we'll see going forward. I'm not too optimistic as long as he's the coach, because when you have a big program like this, there's expectations every year. And if you're not the guy to live up to expectations, they got to find somebody else that can. The only issue is you have an administration and an AD who really don't know what's really going on. So until some things change, we're going to see some of the same stuff. Now, luckily for them, their schedule's pretty weak, so they have a chance to actually do something this year, even though they're not that good. The only issue is if they get to a a Rose Bowl or a big New Year's Six bowl game, it's going to get ugly because they're not good enough for that.
Now, do they have the? Is it more of a coaching not getting the most out of the talent? Because it always seems like every time I watch USC, it always seems like they have an incredibly fast running back, incredibly talented running backs. It just something doesn't seem to click with the few games I watched of them this year, as far as either getting them the ball or quarterback play isn't up to par. And I'm the first one to tell you I'm not smart enough to be able to diagnose every single snap that a quarterback does, nor am I going to go back and rewatch this stuff. That's why I like talking to people that know this stuff a little bit better than I do. But is it more of a coaching or not getting the most out of the talent, or is it more recruiting issues with them?
It's a combo of both, because here's the thing. USC recruits itself. It's one of the few schools that, especially in the state of California, and especially Southern California, that's the most desirable school in that whole part of California. Like, that's the most desirable football school. If you're a high school kid playing football, that's where you want to go for various reasons. So with that being said, it kind of recruits itself, and you get a couple of 5 stars every year just because you're USC without even having to recruit heavily. That's just what it is. However, you have to be able to coach them up, and you have to be able to improve guys, and they haven't done that as of late. Also, another thing is the coaching, the system. As we all know, football in general, you got to have a system in place where you kind of have a pattern of plays you're going to run. We know what you're about. Every good football team, we've known the identity of. We've never had to question the identity of a team in the Super Bowl. We've never had to. We knew what that team was about, whether they're a throwing team, a running team, a defensive team, a balance team. We knew what that team was about. Same thing for college. The good college teams are out there. We know what their identity is. And if you don't, then you're in trouble. And right now, USC football is in a bit of a trouble now. They're not going to be like 4-10 or nothing like that's not going to happen. But they're not going to be as good as they could or should with the talent that they have. They have a lot of high-ranking former recruits, 4- and 5-star guys. But at the same time, if they don't get coached right, it doesn't mean much.
See, I think that's the funny thing you talked about USC being a program that recruits itself. I can think of a couple others. Like, for example, I think Bama recruits itself. I think Miami is a school that definitely should be able to recruit the entire state of Florida, same way that USC should. I think and I can speak to this being up here in Northern California. I think the USC has so much allure because there is the whole concept of, going to sunny Southern California, being up here, going to USC. You think of college football in the state of California, in my opinion, you think USC, Cal, and Stanford they're nice, but they're not, sunny Southern California, palm trees and everything else that USC has the allure of. So I'm always shocked when I see USC not dominating the whole Southern California state, the same way I'm shocked whenever I see Miami not dominating Miami or recruits not going directly to Texas from those schools. I think Texas, Miami, Michigan, Ohio State, SC, Bama, those are all schools that generally should be able to recruit themselves.
Oh, without a doubt. Ohio State's another school. Georgia is becoming a huge school, especially in the state. Now they've been open to get a quarterback that's a dual threat. Justin Fields is going to be very good when he gets his time. There's several schools that recruit themselves. However, I will say this: a big part of recruits. Florida State used to do this all the time. Every time you looked on Monday Night Football, you watch an NFL game, each team would have a guy from Florida State on there. Bowden's last few years and also Jimbo's first few years, it was like, hey, this teams are hella talented, but they're not doing anything, and they get a really good quarterback and they end up winning the whole thing. That's the thing. When you're talented, when you have talent, you gotta be able to coach the talent. There's a lot of schools that put guys in the league. There's a lot of schools that are able to get guys for various reasons, like you mentioned, Southern California. A lot of got Miami. When Miami's rolling right, they're able to get any kid in the state because it's Miami, and when they're doing things right, they're able. Man, they get it rolling when they get rolling down there. But for the most part, it's tough because you have a lot of good coaches in college, a lot of guys with great systems and whatnot. So if you can have all the recruits you want, but if you can't scheme well, if you can't develop well, you're going to underachieve every year.
So I want to stay on that Southern California freeway here for a little bit and travel down to Staples Center. Obviously, you are a big Laker fan. I think they added a few pieces this year. Obviously, the biggest piece they added, in my opinion, was Rajon Rondo. But, that's just my opinion. I think we know my bias when it comes to him. They also added some guy that played in Cleveland. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. He's done well for himself. think he goes by LeBron James, also known
Right.
as the King and stuff. What are your expectations of that team? What would constitute at the end of the year you being happy with that Lakers team?
Well, if they make the playoffs and win a round, I think that'd be successful. I mean, first of all, we don't know what this roster is going to look like come February. I think that's a key. Like, people really aren't mentioning that enough because the roster will look different. They are going to make several moves that will, the roster is going to look a little bit different. However, if this roster is the same as it is now, if they make the second round and are competing to get to the conference finals, I think that's a very successful year with this team. Usually in the West, you got to have two All-Stars to really advance past, Mother's Day. You got to have two solid All-Stars, two guys that can really go, not, two fringe guys. You got to have two legitimate All-Stars. So we'll see what happens with that. However, I do think they're going to be pretty good. Like, I think they're going to be better than most people think. LeBron has young guys that can get back on defense and play on the wing. So I think that's going to be helpful for them. But honestly, it can go a lot of different ways. I mean, they can finish as high as third, or they can finish as low as like 10th or 11th. I mean, you just never quite know what's going to happen because, basketball is a very, very strange sport, especially when you're integrating a lot of new pieces and a lot of guys that, that are used to playing that might not play the minutes they think they should be playing. It can get tricky. But however, I will say with LeBron, it makes that transition a lot easier because you have young guys that are eager to learn, eager to get better. So when that's the case, you have guys that are not going to combat what he's trying to say. If he's saying, hey, we need to do this, this, and that, they're not going to really combat and really trying to go against that. They're going to say, all right, cool, we're gonna do that. Now, in Cleveland, it was a little bit different because he had Kyrie, who was already an all-star starter. He had Kevin Love, who was already an all-star. So it's a little bit different try to get them to jail. With the young players he has now, it's not going to be bad, but they need another big guy because JaVale's a good player in spurts, but he's not a guy you can rely on for 30 minutes a game. So they're going to need another big guy to really try to figure things out. But we'll see. It's gonna be fun. Like, I think it's gonna be fun.
One thing that I took away from him signing with LeBron signing with the Lakers that I think is going to be really fun to watch for me, at least this year, is having the additions of young guys like Kuzma, Ingram, and Lonzo, in the sense to where, in Cleveland, like you said, he had those vets that kind of looked at him as a peer, I think. And I think in LA, you have guys that grew up idolizing this guy from start to finish in his career. And I'm really interested to see how, if LeBron can get guys, and LeBron's always been able to do this, where he's been able to make serviceable role players play a lot better with his ability to move the ball, share the ball, find guys in good spots. I'm really interested to see how guys like Ingram and Kuzma and Lonzo develop under a willing passer and a willing star. He helps get guys better, I think, more than most stars do. So I want to really see how that looks all 82 games of the year, because I think that is something that people might be overlooking. That he has a lot of talent around. He has a lot of young talent around him, like you said, that's willing to get better and looks to him as sort of, this, saying a godlike figure is a bit dramatic, but he's getting one of the best players of their generation to come play with them, and those guys seem like they're willing learners and willing sponges to get better.
Correct, and that's key. That's very key. You have to have a guy like that makes everybody better, but also it's a situation where guys also want to get better. There's a lot of situations where guys already got contracts, they don't really care about getting better. You have a lot of young guys hungry to get better, hungry to get paid. So that's always a good thing when you add in a veteran like LeBron. And it's, LeBron, I mean, for most of those guys, that's the best player they've ever seen, because most of those guys are in early 20s. So LeBron's been around 15, 16 years. This is 16th year. Like, LeBron's probably the best guy they've seen. And, that's kind of how it goes in a lot of cases. And if that's the case, they idolize him, just like it was with Kobe and just like it was with Mike and Magic and all those other guys. When you have a generation of a guy that's been around for a while and he's been doing really well, they're going to look up to him because, like, hey, this guy's been around for 15 years and still playing very well. Yes, I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to take what he has to say, and it's going to make sense. So it should be interesting to see.
So I know you're also a fan of the Dodgers, so I want to travel down I-5 a little bit. I know they ended up taking a loss yesterday, so that series is 2-1 heading into today. What are your expectations of this Dodgers team moving into the playoffs? Because they started out really hot with Kershaw and Ryu having two good games, but where are you coming out with, again, what's a successful season as a Dodger fan for you?
Well, I told someone before the playoffs started, I have no expectations of this team because they've been so Jekyll and Hyde the whole year. They get off to slow starts, they pick it up, and then they go on a run at the end of the year to make win the division, etc. They've just been so hot or cold. The way their offense is really boom or bust. It's more of an American League style where you play for the 3-run homer. That's basically what the American League style. You get a walk, get a hit, and you have your big guys up try to hit on home runs, which is cool. Like I personally don't mind it, but we leave runners in scoring position a lot. It gets kind of old. But expectation wise, I don't have any. If they were to lose the next two games, it wouldn't surprise me. If they were to win the World Series, it would not surprise me. It's just a roster that's kind of flawed, but at the same time, so talented. Like it's pretty much it's up there talent wise with the Astros and Red Sox. Like it's that talented. However, you just don't know what you're going to get on any given night because their lineup is really good and their bench is really good. I mean, they're able to bring off the bench. You got to hit 30-something home runs last night. Not too many teams can do that. So that's a key thing when you look at the way rosters are built. And the way also playoff baseball is. We saw last year the Astros were able to hit a bunch of home runs in the World Series and end up winning the World Series because of that. You got to have power in this league. The way it is now, you got to have guys that can hit the long ball at any part of your lineup, and that's the key. Like to me, that's the key. So looking back at it, looking at the situation, they have the talent to win the whole thing. Do I think they will? I think it's gonna be tough. I think it's gonna be tougher this year than it was last year. But I don't really have a whole lot of expectations for them. If I were a betting man, I would probably bet against them winning it. But I've been wrong a few times.
Now I know they're going 2-1 against the Braves right now with that game being tonight. Is that something to where, if nothing else, they could at least get to the World Series? Because I do think they have enough talent to get past the Braves. I think the Braves are a little too young right now, but I think they're coming, and I think they're going to be here for a while. And as a Mets fan, whatever. I mean, we'll still have Jacob deGrom, who has a 1.7 ERA and gets only 2 runs of run support. But I think that the Braves will be here for a while. Just, do you think that Dodger team is good enough to at least get to or get past the World Series and get past the Brewers?
They are definitely good enough. Like that's definitely not an issue. I mean, we've seen. I mean, even the first 2 games the Brewers played in the playoffs, they didn't put up a bunch of runs. But they put up 3 and 4 runs each game. 3 runs in the first game, 4 in the second at home. So it's not like they're they're this amazing team. However, they are hot right now. So I mean, if you're able to get them, if you're able to get a game up with them early, especially on the road, if you're able to steal a game early in the series, then it puts a lot of pressure on them. Especially a lot of those guys haven't really been in this situation. Their core of the team hasn't. I know Moustakas has, and a couple other guys have, but the meat of their team really hasn't been in this situation before. But we'll see. I think it's going to be a good series if it happens. I think we got a lot of interesting storylines and a lot of fun baseball. However, I have no expectations for the Dodgers. They're just so hot or cold. You just don't know what team you're going to get. However, they do have top 3 talent in the league. And whenever you have that kind of talent, you're in every ballgame.
So we're going to transition off fun teams, and we're going to talk about UNLV football. What the hell is going on? Like, is it still just an issue of not enough talent? Or are they still not recruiting? Or is it the systems? Huh?
But it's year 4 of the Tony Sanchez era. Like, that's the thing. So it's year 4 of an era where we don't know what the hell's going on. Like, it was supposed to be a bowl game year, and then they get, New Mexico puts 50 on them at home. Now their starting quarterback's out for a few weeks, so that's an issue. However, man, I don't see it. Like, I don't see the improvement that a team should have top to bottom. I mean, there's things that have gotten a lot better, but it has to correlate to wins. And if it doesn't, you got to figure out, is this really worth having a program? Because honestly, UNLV football, and of course they're going to have a program now because the new stadium going to be playing games in there. But the UNLV football program is one of the most irrelevant programs in the country in terms of, like, no one thinks or cares about UNLV football. I hate to say it that way, but no one, when you think about the grand scheme of things, very few good things come from that program. Very few things are thought about of that program. And no one really wants to talk about it. But there's a point in time where if Tony Sanchez wasn't going to be named the coach, the Boosters were probably going to shut that program down. Like, they were really close to canceling the program. That's how bad it was. Like those were talks that were had, is that, hey, you know what? This isn't working out. The funding has been horrible for the program. So, hey, if, we might shut this down, but the booster stepped up, they put their guy in place, and he's there now. He's an okay coach, but I don't know. Like, I really Honestly, I really don't know what to say. Tony Sanchez is a guy that he's talked a great game, but at the end of the day, if you don't win 6 games with the schedule they have, it really doesn't mean much.
And that was one thing I think when they first got Tony Sanchez, because he was the head coach at Gorman for a while. I was, if nothing else, hopeful that I thought they could keep a lot of guys in state. Now, I didn't think that they were going to be able to keep the top tier guys out of Gorman staying in state. I think that's too unrealistic. But I thought, if nothing else, he would be able to get a lot of guys and be able to have that Gorman to UNLV pipeline working pretty solid. But for them not to be improving year after year, I just wonder, was that the school's expectation as well? And it doesn't look like it's really come to fruition.
Well, here's the issue. Guys, one Gorman isn't the same team anymore. Like, that's another thing. A lot of the big boosters at Gorman, their kids have graduated, so they really haven't put the same amount of funds in that program as it once was. They're not getting the same transfers and the same guys they once had. With that being said, it's not really looking good. To be honest with you, it's not. It's a situation where, it's a situation where if you were relying on that, he's in trouble. I think UNLV should be a program where you try to rely on transfers, try to rely on guys that are maybe some underappreciated recruits, but at the same time, and you got to be progressing somehow, some way. The way they looked on Saturday, even though they had a backup quarterback, it just looked awful. Like it looked like a team like the old UNLV team, and that's not a good situation. Now, do they have time in the schedule to probably get 6 wins? It remains to be seen. You need 4 more wins, and they were counting this one as a win. So I don't know. Like, it's a weird dynamic there. It's a really weird dynamic. He's very lucky that it's not the basketball where a lot of people don't care about football as much. Basketball is almost geared toward that too. But football in this city, it's really an afterthought when it comes to UNLV. So Sanchez is very lucky in that case. So he's going to have another year or two to get things right. I just don't think he's going to be able to do so. I think it's really difficult to build a program here. And also, if you're going to build a sports program, you got to be fully committed to it, meaning that, yeah, you can get new facilities, new jerseys and whatnot, but what's your coaching staff like? Are they able to go out there and recruit like they're supposed to? If UNLV basketball has assistant coaches paying for their own cell phone bill, I can only imagine what the UNLV football coaches are going through.
Mm-hmm. Now, is UNLV basketball, and I'm not in the city anymore, obviously, with me moving out, and I got a chance to go watch them play UOP last year, and I kind of wanted to see, because, I always have ties to the UNLV basketball program just because I had lived there for 4 years. I understand that is I would say that's and I was there before the Golden Knights got there, but I would say UNLV basketball is the local sport of choice in that city. I think that city still holds on to those early 90s teams pretty heavily. So I always want to try to go see them when I can. And I also wanted to see Damon Stoudemire coach. I thought the idea of seeing a guy that I grew up watching in college coach, college basketball would have been pretty cool. And you know me well enough to know if the tickets are cheap and I can get good seats, I'll probably be there. But what is up with UNLV basketball going into this year? I admit I haven't really kept up with them, but what's a good year for UNLV basketball this year?
Ooh, man, that's a loaded question because this is a kind of a make or break year for Marvin Menzies. He's a guy that I think the perception of him coming into the school was way different than the perception of him now. With that being said, they're almost becoming irrelevant. Like, as crazy as it sounds, even in Vegas. So with the Raiders coming, the Golden Knights having the season they had, people really aren't paying attention to UNLV hoops, and the program isn't giving the fans anything to get hyped about. That's the one thing people don't realize is, like, for the longest time, this city was UNLV hoops no matter what, win, lose, or draw, UNLV hoops. Now there's other options. Even with the A's minor league team, there's just other options in the city. So, right, if UNLV makes NIT, it's a really good year. They had talent last year. They had a McDonald's All-American on the team last year. They had one of the best JUCO transfers in the country last year and didn't do anything with it. If they can stay out playing the playing game in their own conference tournament, it'll be a successful season. They just have to really establish an identity, and that's been a problem ever since Lon Kruger left. We don't know what kind of team UNLV is going to put on the court. What's the identity of the team? And until that happens, it's going to be the same old, same old.
So I want to send this home by talking about my hometown basketball team, the Kings of House Sacramento. It just, oh boy, 82 games a year. That's what we get out here in Sacramento. As an outsider, what are your? I know you're someone who covers the basketball pretty passionately. You know your stuff really well. What are your thoughts of this year? Like, I have my expectations, and they are very simple. I get to watch 82 games of my favorite basketball team play every year. I think they're going to be the worst team in the West. I have no idea what the hell they're doing in a league that's moving more and more past the 3-point line. They're going to trot out 4 7-footers at like mid-range jump shots. But what are your thoughts of the Kings of House Sacramento this season?
Well, they have a lot of weird pieces and a lot of talent. Like you said, though, they don't mix well. I mean, you're throwing out 4 7-footers that really don't complement each other very well.
Yes.
Also, when your second pick in overall draft is talking about his music and he's a rapper, I have some doubts about that. That's not the thing I really want to hear my guy I just spent the second overall pick on hear about. But things are what they are. With the Kings, again, another team that needs an identity. No one knows what the Kings are about. Part of it is because of ownership. The owner doesn't know what he wants to do.
Yes.
That's part of the issue as well. And Vlade is basically carrying out the owner's thoughts. So people want to go on Vlade a lot, and it is what it is. I understand that. However, he's just carrying out the owner's wishes. That's all it is. It's not like he has a whole lot to say. People don't get this. Owners control things. It's not the players. It's not the coach. It's not the GM, the owner. Whatever the owner says, he gets. So if he wants a certain thing, he gets it. If the owner can stand back a little bit and let the basketball people do what they need to do, things may be different. I do like De'Aaron Fox. I do like Buddy Hield a little bit. I like Bogdanovich. So, those guys are pretty good for a backcourt. It's not bad. But, the Jacksons, I think Giles is going to be pretty good. There's a lot of weird pieces. I just don't know how they all mix. That's the issue. But I'll put it this way. It's not going to be an easy game. Like, Sac has a lot of talent. So, especially a lot of those teams are coming in playing 3 games in 4 nights and, 4 games in 6 nights. You come to Sac on the end of that trip, and you've got a young, energetic team, it can be a difficult matchup for you.
Yeah, I think the one thing, the glimmer of hope that I have is at least they're going young finally. They're not trying to bring in the George Hills. They're not trying to bring in, the guys on the Vince Carters. And I love Vince, but, they're not trying to bring in those style of vets. They're not trying to bring in the guy in their 12th year, taking away playing time from, De'Aaron Fox or Bogdan. And I do think Vince was an incredible leader and taught those guys a lot. But, those guys are pros, and George Hill's a pro, and he obviously doesn't want to be a part of a bad team if he doesn't have to be. If nothing else, they're going young, and it reminds me of the early aughts Clippers teams where they had like Darius Miles, Nelton Brand, and, the Keon Doolings and all those guys, to where we got enough draft picks. Like, eventually, if you're picking that high in the draft, you've got to get a couple cornerstones. I personally am not terribly sold on Willie Cauley-Stein. I love his confidence saying that he wants to go get paid, but I don't know where exactly he's going to get paid. For me, it seems like he's a prime candidate to be overpaid by either Dallas or Brooklyn for some strange reason. But they got enough talent with Giles if he stays healthy, with Fox and Bogey back there. They at least got to get something right. And if we get 82 games, then at least they're going to be fun to watch.
Definitely, and that's the key. With a young team, the one thing you want is at least to be fun. The worst thing in the world is being bad and being a terrible team to watch. That's like the worst, because then you have literally no incentive to watch, because it can get ugly. I mean, there's nothing worse than playing a terrible style of basketball, getting your head kicked in every other game, and there's just nothing to look forward to. It's rough, man. It really does test the patience of the fan base, especially when you have one of the best teams ever about 80 miles down the road.
Yeah, they're pretty good at what they do. If you like a team that makes baskets, makes threes, wins a bunch of games, wins 3 titles in 4 years, it's not bad. I prefer my team to have a little bit more scrap in them, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
What's funny is we went through this whole podcast. We talked basketball. We talked a lot of LA sports, and I think this has kind of been the thing in the NBA. Does it feel like Boogie signing with Golden State's kind of been a forgotten issue? Like it's
definitely not forgotten. That's first and foremost. It's definitely, there's no way it's been forgotten. If anything, People have tried to forget about it, but it's definitely not forgotten. Here's the thing: when DeMarcus Cousins went to, I think it was July 4th.
I was walking to Disneyland, so I don't know specifically what day it was, but my fiance and I were walking to Disneyland, and I remember her just shrieking, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "We just signed Boogie," and I looked at the numbers, and I was like, "You just signed him for like California minimum wage."
Right. And with that being said, it was like I want to say it was July 4th, but whatever day it was that he signed, it was a situation where like it was a shockwave because now you're adding the team's already great. Like the team doesn't need him to win. Like they can win a championship currently constructed.
Mm-hmm.
However, they bring him in to a team that is one of the best teams of all time. You can make a case they're the most dangerous team of all time because no one's had this kind of firepower before on a roster. Like no one's had. They have the three of the best 7 or 8 shooters I've ever seen in my life on one. So they're already dangerous enough. You add this guy, people have tried to forget about it because it's so crazy to think of a team this good being able to have the firepower that they have. But man, no, it's definitely not forgotten. I tell you that. The rest of the league is like, what the? Because like you add another All-Star to a team of 4 All-Stars. Like that's the thing. You add in a situation like, put it this way, hypothetically, if Kevin Durant does leave next summer, which could or can, could happen, it's a possibility. They have DeMarcus Cousins. He's obviously not as good as KD, but you have another All-Star to fill in if need be. So there's a lot of different things going on, and man, it's crazy. Like it really is crazy.
Yeah, it is, and I don't want to say it was totally forgotten because I mean, obviously Boogie's one of my favorite players. He's signing with the team that just won the title, but it just seems like with all the other chatter with LeBron going to LA and Kawhi going to Toronto, it just feels in a weird way like this whole thing.
No, I'm telling you right now, when that deal happened, it pretty much was like, damn, like because everybody thought they had a chance. Everybody, before the season starts or the off season, everyone thinks they have a chance, and it's like, damn, they just got DeMarcus Cousins, and it's not about getting DeMarcus Cousins. They didn't have to give up anything to get him. That's the thing. That's the thing that was like, what the? Because it's one thing, hey, we got to trade Clay to get him. Nah, they didn't have to trade anybody. They got him for the cheap, and that hurts. Like that hurts a lot of teams because it's like, damn, he could have went anywhere else. He could have went to the Lakers. He could have went to Knicks, wherever. No, he goes to Golden State for a year, and that makes it puts it increases their margin of error. They can come out and play an 80% game and still beat you by 15.
And what's funny is I was telling my fiance this the other day and telling a couple other friends, I just want to see one game this year. And I know we're going to get a bunch of them when Boogie comes back, but like I want to see the game where it all just clicks. Like when you're literally running like a Western Conference All-Star team out there against like the Mavericks or something. I just want to see the game where it all clicks and the other team across the court can do nothing.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. I mean, they're a really good team. They're a really good team, man. It's scary the kind of lineups they can put out, what they can do. I mean, they can at any given time have 5 All-Stars out there. And when Andre Iguodala is like your 6th best player, you're in pretty good shape because Iguodala could start for like most of the teams in the league right now, or not play like 35 minutes a night for most teams, or not maybe not 35, but they can play like 30 minutes a night for teams. And for him to be like your 6th best guy, that's insane.
Even guys like Livingston and Jordan Bell and Kevon Looney, who played well at the big spot last year, like Kevon Looney's literally probably their 9th best guy. Not to mention they added Jerebko, who's not a slouch by any stretch of the imagination.
Jerebko might be their 10th best guy. Like that's the craziest thing. Like Jerebko might be their 10th best guy. This is the guy I think 2 years ago he was started for Boston in the conference finals. So yeah, like they're in a scary, scary team, man. It's really not fair, but no, it definitely hasn't been forgotten. People just try to forget it because it's so crazy to think of a team with 5 All-Stars and also a team that really now has some extra motivation because DeMarcus Cousins has been treated unfairly for the majority of his career, and they're going to try to win one for him, especially if he's a guy that has a couple big playoff games to help him along the way. It's going to be even more satisfying. But the Warriors are three-peating if they're healthy. Like there's no debating that. They're a team that is on a mission, and now with that mission being what it is, it would be a shock if they don't win it if they're healthy.
And that's the insane thing to me is that they're so much fun to watch. And what's weird about that whole thing to me is that for the most part, and obviously we're not in that locker room, they all seem to get along relatively well. Like I remember watching them do the surprise party for Steph's birthday and just how much fun and cohesion that was. I think their biggest recruiting tool, other than having all that talent, is it looks like it's fun to play basketball there. And watching Cleveland on the other end of that court last year for those conference finals, Cleveland never looked like it was a fun place to play basketball. You come to Golden State, I think it's a great recruiting tool for guys like Boogie and guys like, whatever free agent they land next year for minimum wage who's an all-star. Like, it looks like it's so much fun to play ball there.
Because, Steph doesn't have an ego. So whenever your best player doesn't have a huge ego, it's different. It changes everything. It changes the whole complexity of it. Now, we don't know Steph behind the scenes, but everything we've seen and know in front of the scenes, it looks like a guy that's just happy to be there, and he doesn't really take this is the main guy, or this is our ego guy, or this is our what's the term everyone likes, or what's the name, the dominant guy, I can't think
the alpha.
Yeah, there you go, the alpha. Yeah, he doesn't really care about that. He just comes to play and he brings it. So when the face of the franchise is like that, then everyone else kind of follows suit. So the environment's different. LeBron does things a little bit differently. Kobe did things differently. Michael, Magic, Bird, those guys are a little bit different. But Steph is generally like that. He really doesn't care. We don't know enough about Tim Duncan, and I don't believe a lot of the hype that the media tries to sell us about the Spurs, because we saw how their whole system crashed this summer. But with that being said, like, Steph is a guy that generally doesn't care about that stuff. He just comes to work, does what he does, and goes home to his family. So for me, when I look at a guy like that, if he's cool with getting, taking less shots and, trying to put the team first, and everybody else has to do that. And in that system where everybody gets to shoot, everybody gets to pass, everybody gets to be a team player, everybody gets to contribute, yeah, you're going to like it. Now, not every team's like that. Some teams are where you just stand in the corner and shoot. Like on the Cavs, if you want LeBron or Kevin Love, you're just standing in the corner to shoot. And that's not really cool if you're certain NBA players.
Absolutely, man. So we're going to ride out of here on that note. But again, where can people check you out? I know you do a lot of work with ESPN and stuff like that, but where can people check you out everywhere on social media? And then let people know again where they can listen to you cover sports.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at the Jameson. That usually everything's posted there. I really don't get on Facebook that much. So we don't have to worry about that. Let's see here. Again, ESPN 1100 in Vegas. ESPN, I hope it's 1560. It's either 1560 or 1480. I gotta memorize it. Out in Nebraska, Fox Sports 1340 in Vegas. In New Mexico, Dry Time Sports in Utah, and then 7:20 a.m. I think it's like in 4 or 5 different states. So yeah, it's pretty cool, man. NBA is coming. The opening night is next Tuesday, so it should be fun.
Absolutely, man. It's something I'm looking forward to. I know the Kings get the Jazz on Wednesday, so I'll get a chance to, if I'm not working Wednesday night, I'll probably get a chance to stream it out here. But it should be fun to watch. But you can check out all 81 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get podcasts. Also available at nocoastbias.com, as well as my wrestling writing. You can check out the little writing I do about the Sacramento Kings through Fansided at A Royal Pain. Shout out to Rafe and Jonathan, who do a lot of good stuff over there for a team that definitely could use some good contributions this year. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, GULLYBLANCHARD. So we will be back next week with Chris Walder from The Score in Toronto, also Dan Poltz of Wrestle Rap. But until then, Jameson, man, thank you very much for making the time and coming on.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, as always.
No problem, man. So we'll be back next week. Until then, you guys be good, have fun, and we'll talk to you soon.